Waitress begged the Alpha King to hide her. What he did shocked the entire pack. If you value your life, little mouse, you will stop shaking and tell me why you smell like a grave that's been dug up and filled in twice. Yorick Ravensfall didn't shout. He didn't have to. The rain hammered against the stained glass of the throne room, but his voice cut through the storm like a serrated blade. Briseis, her waitress uniform torn and soaked in mud, pressed her forehead against the cold marble floor. "Please," she whispered, the word fracturing in her throat. "I don't want money. I don't want protection. Just hide me. Put me in the cellar. Put me with the dogs. Just don't let him find me." The Alpha King leaned forward, the shadows of the room clinging to his broad shoulders. "Hide you?" A dark, unamused chuckle rumbled in his chest, vibrating through the floorboards beneath her. "No one hides from a Alaric Stronghaven, unless, of course, they belong to me." The neon sign of the Rusty Spoon flickered with a dying buzz, casting a sickly yellow light over the wet asphalt of the parking lot. Inside, the diner smelled of stale coffee, burning grease, and the distinct, metallic tang of hopelessness. Briseis wiped down the counter for the 50th time that hour, her knuckles white against the rag. It was 2 a.m., the witching hour for truckers, drifters, and things that preferred the dark. She kept her head down, her dark hair falling like a curtain around her face, trying to be invisible. Invisibility was her only armor. For 6 months, she had been a ghost, moving from town to town, shedding names like snakeskin. Here, she was just Bree, the girl who poured coffee and didn't ask questions. "Refill, darling." A trucker grunted from the corner booth. Briseis moved automatically, the pot of decaf heavy in her hand. Her heart, however, was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She had felt it an hour ago, a prickle on the back of her neck, a shift in the air pressure. It was the sensation of being watched by a predator. She poured the coffee, her eyes darting to the rain-streaked window. A black SUV had been idling across the street for 20 minutes. The engine was off, the lights were dead, but she knew it wasn't empty. "He found me." The thought paralyzed her. Alaric Stronghaven. The name alone was enough to make strong men weep in the hidden world of shifters and rogues. She wasn't a wolf, she was human, or so she had always believed, but she had seen what Alaric did to those who defied him. She had seen the blood. She had stolen the ledger. That was her crime. She had taken the only thing that could destroy him, and now, the most vicious alpha in the Southern Territories was hunting a waitress. The bell above the diner door jingled. It wasn't a gentle sound. It sounded like a warning shot. Briseis froze. 2 men walked in. They didn't look like truckers. They wore tailored leather jackets that cost more than the diner, and they moved with a predatory grace that screamed shifter. One of them, a man with a scar slicing through his eyebrow, sniffed the air deeply. "Lavender," the scarred man said, his voice a low growl. "And fear. She's here." Briseis didn't wait. She dropped the coffee pot. The glass shattered, scalding brown liquid splashing across the linoleum. As the sound echoed, she vaulted over the counter, sprinting for the kitchen. "Get her." The roar behind her was inhuman. Briseis burst through the swinging doors, slipping on grease, scrambling past the bewildered cook. She hit the back exit, throwing her shoulder against the heavy metal door. It flew open, and the storm swallowed her whole. Rain lashed at her face, cold and biting. She ran blindly into the alley, her sneakers splashing through puddles of oil and grime. She could hear them behind her heavy footsteps, the sound of fabric tearing as bodies began to shift, bones cracking and reshaping. They were shifting. They were going to hunt her down like a rabbit. She didn't run toward the highway. That was suicide. She ran toward the woods. The forest bordering the town was dense, ancient, and forbidden. Locals whispered about it. They said it belonged to the Ravensfall pack. They said the king who ruled there was more monster than man, a creature cursed by the moon itself. They said he killed trespassers and drank their blood. Briseis didn't care about rumors. A monster she didn't know was better than the monster she did. She tore through the underbrush, branches whipping her face, leaving stinging welts on her cheeks. Her lungs burned. The growls behind her were getting closer, guttural and hungry. A massive grey wolf burst through the tree line to her left, snapping its jaws inches from her arm. She screamed, scrambling up a rocky embankment. She slipped, her knee smashing against a stone, blinding pain shooting up her leg. She crawled, mud caking her fingernails. I'm going to die here. I'm going to die in the mud. Suddenly, the air changed. The wind stopped howling. The rain seemed to pause. A shadow detached itself from the darkness ahead. It wasn't a tree. It was a man. Or rather, a giant in the shape of a man, standing perfectly still in the chaotic storm. He wore a long, dark coat that billowed around him, and his eyes were glowing with a terrifying, luminescent violet hue. The grey wolf chasing Briseis skidded to a halt, whining low in its throat. It turned and fled, tail between its legs. Briseis collapsed at the stranger's feet, gasping for air, clutching the hem of his coat. She looked up, rain plastering her hair to her skull. She saw a jaw defined by brutal angles, lips pressed in a thin line of annoyance, and those violet eyes looking down at her with zero empathy. "You are noisy," the man said. His voice was deep, resonating in her chest. "And you are trespassing." Briseis grabbed his boot. "Help me," she choked out. "Why?" "Because," she gasped, looking back at the darkness where Alaric's men were regrouping. "Because I have something the devil wants, and I'm not letting him have it." Yorick Ravensfall, the Alpha King, tilted his head. For the first time in a century, he was intrigued. The great hall of Ravensfall Keep was silent, save for the crackling of the massive hearth fire that dominated the eastern wall. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, the kind of silence that precedes an execution. Yorick sat on his throne, a monstrosity of carved obsidian and grey velvet. He looked bored. One hand propped up his chin, while the other tapped a rhythmic beat on the armrest. In front of him, Briseis shivered. She was surrounded. Dozens of pack members lined the walls, their eyes glowing gold and amber in the dim light. They were beautiful and terrifying, radiating a power that made the air hum. To Yorick's right stood Zephyr Windthorn, his beta. Zephyr was handsome in a roguish way, with wind-tossed blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Currently, he looked furious. "She is a human." "Yorick," Zephyr hissed, stepping forward. "A human waitress. And she brought Alaric's sense right to our doorstep. The treaty with Stronghaven is fragile as it is. Harboring his fugitive? It's an act of war." "I am aware of the treaty, Zephyr," Yorick said lazily. "Then throw her back out," spoke a sharp, melodic voice. Callista stepped from the shadows. She was stunning, with hair like liquid fire and a dress that clung to curves honed by years of combat. She looked at Briseis as one might look at a cockroach on a wedding cake. "She is weak. She smells of cheap grease and fear. She brings nothing to the pack but liability." Briseis flinched. They were talking about her as if she were an object, a piece of meat to be discarded. But she refused to cry. She had cried enough in the last 6 months. She stood up straighter, wincing as her injured knee protested. "I can work," Briseis said, her voice trembling but audible. The hall went deadly silent. No one spoke to the Alpha King without permission. Yorick's eyes snapped to hers. "You can work?" I can cook. I can clean. I can fix things," she stammered, fighting the urge to look away from his intense violet gaze. "I know how to balance books. I have the ledger. I know Alaric's trade routes. I know where he keeps his money. A waitress who balances illegal trade ledgers." Yorick mused. He stood up. The movement was fluid, like water flowing over rock. He descended the dais, the pack parting like the Red Sea. He stopped inches from her. He smelled of rain, pine, and something ancient like old parchment and blood. He circled her. Briseis held her breath. He leaned in close to her neck, inhaling deeply, She expected him to bite. Instead, he lingered there, his breath hot against her cold skin. "Zephyr is right," Yorick murmured, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You are a liability. Alaric will come for you. He will burn our borders to get to you." "Then let him come," Briseis whispered. "I'd rather die fighting than go back to him." Yorick pulled back, looking at her face. He saw the bruise forming on her cheek. He saw the terror in her eyes. But beneath it, a spark of defiance that refused to be extinguished. It was rare. Even his own wolves cowered before him, terrified of the curse that ran in his bloodline. But this tiny, fragile human was standing her ground. He turned to the pack. "The girl stays." A collective gasp rippled through the room. "Yorick!" Zephyr shouted, losing his composure. "You cannot be serious. For a human? For her? She is not a guest," Yorick declared, his voice booming, silencing the protests. "And she is not a prisoner." He turned back to Briseis, a cruel, amused smirk playing on his lips. "You said you wanted to hide. I will hide you. You said you could work? Then you shall work." He walked back to his throne, sitting with a regal finality. "She is under my personal protection. Anyone who touches her, anyone who leaks her location to Stronghaven, answers to me. And you know how much I detest traitors." He pointed a gloved finger at Briseis. "But do not mistake this for kindness, little mouse. You owe me a life debt now, and I collect my debts with interest. Take her to the servants' quarters in the East Wing. If she tries to run, break her legs." Briseis felt the blood drain from her face. She had asked for safety, and she had received it. But as she looked at the cold, beautiful monster on the throne, she realized she had simply traded one devil for another. The east wing of Ravensfall Keep was a labyrinth of stone corridors and drafty rooms, far removed from the opulence of the main hall. Briseis had been given a small room with a narrow bed, a wash basin, and a single window that overlooked the sheer cliff drop behind the castle. 3 days had passed since her arrival. 3 days of silence. 3 days of waiting for the other shoe to drop. She had been assigned to the kitchens, a chaotic domain ruled by an elderly she-wolf named Martha, who wielded a ladle like a war hammer. Martha was the only one who didn't look at Briseis with open hostility. The others, the guards, the maids, the warriors passing through glared at her with golden eyes filled with suspicion. To them, she was the reason their king was risking war. Briseis scrubbed the copper pots until her fingers were raw. The physical labor was grounding. It kept her mind off the ledger she had hidden under the loose floorboard beneath her bed. It kept her mind off Alaric, but it didn't keep her mind off Yorick. She hadn't seen him since that night in the throne room. Yet, his presence was everywhere. The castle seemed to breathe with him. The shadows seemed to move at his command. "You missed a spot," a silky voice purred. Briseis stiffened. She turned to find Callista leaning against the doorframe of the scullery. The red-haired woman was peeling an apple with a knife that looked far too sharp for fruit. "I'll clean it," Briseis said, dipping her sponge back into the soapy water. Callista walked into the room, the heels of her boots clicking on the stone. "You think you're safe here, don't you? Because the big bad wolf claimed you?" "I don't think I'm safe anywhere," Briseis replied honestly. Callista laughed, a harsh, grating sound. She used the tip of the knife to lift Briseis's chin, forcing her to look up. "Yorick doesn't save people, human. He uses them. He's bored. You're a new toy, a novelty. Once he breaks you, and he will break you, he'll toss your body over the cliffs to feed the crows." "Why do you care?" Briseis asked, pulling away from the knife. "If I'm just a toy, why are you threatened?" Callista's eyes flashed a dangerous orange. She slammed her hand against the wall next to Briseis's head, cracking the stone. "I am the lead warrior of this pack. I am destined to be his mate. I am not threatened by a waitress. I am disgusted. Callista." The voice came from the shadows of the hallway. "Lo. Warning." Yorick stepped into the light. He wasn't wearing his formal coat today. He was in a black linen shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and covered in faint, silvery scars. He looked less like a king and more like a brawler. Callista immediately backed away, her demeanor shifting from aggression to sultry submission in a heartbeat. Alpha. I was just explaining the rules to the stray. I believe Martha explains the rules of the kitchen, Yorick said, his face impassive. Leave us. Callista shot a venomous look at Briseis before bowing her head and slinking out of the room. The silence that followed was suffocating. Briseis wiped her wet hands on her apron, her heart racing. Are you adjusting? Yorick asked. He didn't look at her. He was inspecting a rack of drying herbs hanging from the ceiling. I'm alive, Briseis said. That's an adjustment. Yorick turned to her. His violet eyes scanned her, lingering on her raw, red hands. He frowned. He reached out, grabbing her wrist before she could pull away. His grip was iron, but his touch was surprisingly warm. You are working too hard, he stated. I'm earning my keep, like you said. I said you would work. I didn't say you would ruin yourself. He released her hand abruptly, as if her skin burned him. My spies tell me Alaric has crossed the border. He is burning villages looking for you. Briseis felt the room spin. He's killing people? Because of me? He is killing people because he is Alaric, Yorick corrected. But yes, you are the catalyst. Then give me to him, Briseis said, tears stinging her eyes. I can't have that blood on my hands. I'll give him the ledger. Maybe he'll stop. The ledger is useless to him if you are dead, and he will kill you the moment he has it. Yorick took a step closer, towering over her. The kitchen felt suddenly very small, and I do not give up what is mine. I'm not yours, Briseis snapped, fear giving way to a sudden, reckless anger. I'm a person, not a stray dog you picked up. Yorick stared at her. Most people would be trembling. Most wolves would be exposing their throats in submission. She was glaring at him with wet, furious eyes. A slow smile spread across his face. It wasn't the cruel smirk from the throne room. It was something else. Something dangerous. You have spirit, Briseis, he said, testing her name on his tongue for the first time. It's a shame. It will likely get you killed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, glass vial filled with a shimmering blue liquid. He set it on the counter. Drink this before you sleep. It will heal your hands and your knee. What is it? She asked suspiciously. Magic, he said simply. And lock your door tonight, little mouse. Callista is not the only one who thinks you don't belong here. I saved you from the wolves outside, but the ones inside are hungrier. He turned and walked away, the shadows swallowing him up. Briseis stared at the vial, her heart pounding in her chest. She realized then that hiding in the Alpha's castle wasn't a reprieve. It was just a different kind of hunt, and she wasn't sure if she was the player or the prey. The potion Yorick had given her tasted like blueberries and ash. Briseis had hesitated, swirling the iridescent liquid in the vial, but the throbbing in her knee was unbearable. She drank it. Within minutes, the pain dissolved into a dull, rhythmic thrumming, and sleep pulled her under like a riptide. She woke to the sound of scratching. It wasn't a branch against the window. It was the sound of metal picking at wood. The lock. Briseis sat up, the sheets pooling around her waist. The room was pitch black, save for a sliver of moonlight cutting through the heavy curtains. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Yorick's warning echoed in her ears. The wolves inside are hungrier. She didn't scream. Screaming was for people who expected to be saved. Briseis slid out of bed, her bare feet silent on the cold stone. She grabbed the only weapon she had, a heavy iron candlestick she had swiped from the hallway earlier that day. The door handle turned, slowly, deliberately. The latch clicked. As the door creaked open, a shadow spilled into the room. It was huge, hulking, and smelled of wet fur and rot. It wasn't Callista. This was something wilder. A rogue? Inside the keep, the intruder lunged. Briseis didn't freeze. She swung the candlestick with every ounce of terror and adrenaline in her body. It connected with a sickening crack against the intruder's shoulder. The figure roared, a sound that was half man, half beast, and backhanded her. She flew across the room, crashing into the wash basin. Water splashed everywhere. Pain exploded in her temple, but she scrambled back up. Cornered, the beast advanced, claws lengthening, eyes glowing a muddy, sickly yellow. "Alaric sends his regards," the creature rasped. Briseis braced herself for the bite. Suddenly, the doorway ceased to exist. It was filled by a storm of black mist and violet light. Yorick didn't walk into the room. He materialized. One moment he was at the threshold. The next, his hand was wrapped around the intruder's throat. The Alpha King lifted the massive rogue off the ground, as if he were a rag doll. "You dare?" Yorick's voice was a low, vibrating hum that made Briseis's teeth ache. "In my house?" The rogue clawed at Yorick's arm, but the king didn't flinch. With a snarl of disgust, Yorick threw the intruder through the open door, sending him crashing into the stone wall of the corridor with enough force to shake the dust from the ceiling. Guards came running, their boots thundering on the stone. Zephyr was leading them, his sword drawn. "Take him to the dungeon," Yorick commanded, not looking away from the unconscious heap. "If he dies before I question him, I will take it as a personal insult." The guards dragged the body away. Zephyr lingered, his eyes darting to Briseis, who was clutching the candlestick like a lifeline, blood trickling from her temple. "Leave us," Yorick said. Yorick. The security breach. "Leave us." The command was laced with alpha power. Zephyr bowed stiffly and retreated, closing the door, what was left of it, behind him. Yorick turned to Briseis. The violet fire in his eyes dimmed, replaced by a cold, clinical assessment. He strode toward her. Briseis flinched, raising the candlestick. He stopped, his expression hardening. "Put that down, little mouse. If I wanted to hurt you, you would already be dead." Briseis lowered her arm, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her knees weak. He got in. "You said I was safe." "I said I would hide you. I did not say you were safe. Nowhere is safe." He reached out, his thumb brushing the cut on her temple. His leather glove was soft, surprisingly gentle. "You are bleeding." "I hit him," she whispered, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in her throat. "I hit a werewolf with a candlestick." I saw. A flicker of something like pride passed through his eyes. "You have terrible form, but excellent timing." He sighed, the sound weary and human. "You cannot stay here. The East Wing is too exposed. The wards are old." "Where am I supposed to go?" Briseis asked, wiping the blood from her face. "The cellar? The kennels?" Yorick looked at her, his gaze intense and unreadable. "No. You will come with me." "With you?" "Where?" "To the Alpha's tower," he stated, turning and walking toward the door. He paused, looking back over his shoulder. "Grab your things, Briseis. From this moment on, you sleep in my quarters." The scandal rocked the pack by breakfast. The human, the stray, the liability had been moved into the king's private suite. It was unheard of. The Alpha's tower was sacred ground. No one entered without an invitation, not even the Beta. And now, a waitress from a roadside diner was sleeping in the guest chamber, across the hall from the king himself. For Briseis, the luxury was terrifying. Her new room was larger than the entire diner. The bed was made of silk and down. There was a fireplace that never seemed to go out, but the door locked from the outside. She was safe, yes. But she was also a prisoner in a gilded cage. 2 days passed. She saw Yorick only in passing, a dark blur of coat and command, as he left for war councils. But on the third night, he didn't leave. Briseis was sitting by the fire in the common room of the suite, the stolen ledger spread open on her lap. She had been staring at the numbers for hours, trying to find the pattern she knew was there. The door to Yorick's bedroom opened. He walked in, wearing loose trousers and a white shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He looked exhausted. He held 2 crystal tumblers of amber liquid. He sat in the velvet armchair opposite her, extending a glass. "Drink," It helps with the nerves. Briseis took it. It smelled like honey and fire. She took a sip and coughed as it burned all the way down. What is this? Dragon's breath whiskey. Rare, potent. He took a long swallow of his own, watching her over the rim of the glass. You are still reading that book. Zephyr says it is just trade routes for illegal spice. Zephyr is looking at the numbers, Briseis said, her voice gaining confidence. He needs to look at the dates. Yorick lowered his glass. Explain. Briseis turned the ledger around, pointing to a column of red ink. These shipments. They aren't spices. Look at the dates. Every single one of them corresponds to a blood moon over the last 20 years. And the locations? They aren't markets. They're ruins. Ancient shifter temples. Yorick leaned forward, his apathy vanishing. He traced the line with his finger. He is excavating. No, Briseis corrected. He's collecting. He's not buying goods, Yorick. He's buying bones. The silence in the room was deafening. Yorick looked at her, really looked at her, with a dawning realization that chilled the air. Necromancy, he whispered. The forbidden art. If Alaric is trying to resurrect the old kings, then he needs a vessel. Briseis finished. And he needs a sacrifice. And you. Yorick stood up, pacing the room, the energy rolling off him in waves. You stole the proof. That is why he is so desperate. It is not about the money. You hold the key to his ascension. He stopped pacing and looked at her. The firelight danced in his violet eyes, making them look like dying stars. You are smarter than my entire council combined, Briseis. I just pay attention to details, she said, blushing under his scrutiny. Waitresses have to. We remember who takes cream and who tips poorly. Yorick laughed. It was a genuine, rusty sound. You reduce yourself to that role so easily. But you are more. You have the heart of a queen, little mouse. The air between them shifted. It grew thick, charged with a sudden, magnetic pull. Yorick walked toward her. He took the ledger from her lap and set it on the table, then took her hands in his. Why did you really run? He asked softly. You could have thrown this book in a river and disappeared. Why keep it? Why bring it to me? Because, Briseis whispered, looking up at him, her heart pounding. I saw what he did to a family in Oakhaven. I couldn't just let him win, and everyone said you were the only thing he feared. And now? Yorick stepped closer. His knees brushed hers. Do you fear me? Yes, she admitted, breathless. Good. He leaned down. His face was inches from hers. She could feel the heat radiating from his skin. Fear keeps you alive. But know this, Briseis, I would burn this world to ash before I let him take you. He didn't kiss her. He pulled back at the last second, a mask of restraint slamming down over his features. But the promise hung in the air, heavier than any vow. Tomorrow night is the equinox ball, he said, his voice rough. The entire pack will be there. The allied alphas will be there. You will attend. Me? But Callista said, Callista does not rule this pack. I do. He walked to the door of his bedroom. Wear red. It is the color of Ravensfall. Let them see that you are under my banner. The ballroom was a sea of velvet, silk, and predatory gazes. The chandeliers, made of enchanted ice, dripped cold light onto the dancers below. Briseis stood at the top of the grand staircase. She felt like an imposter. The dress Yorick had commissioned for her was scandalous, a deep, blood-red silk that clung to her like a second skin, with a slit that went up to her thigh and a back that plunged dangerously low. She took a deep breath and descended. The conversation in the hall died instantly. Hundreds of eyes turned to her. Whispers broke out like wildfire. The human. The waitress. Look at the color. She wears the king's colors. Callista, standing near the punch bowl in a gown of emerald green, looked like she might shatter her glass. Zephyr looked resigned, shaking his head as he downed a drink. Yorick was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. He wore a formal military uniform of black and silver, his medals gleaming. He looked devastatingly handsome and utterly terrifying. He extended his hand. "Head up, little mouse. Do not let them see you tremble." Briseis placed her hand in his. "I think I might vomit." "Aim for Zephyr, if you do," he murmured, a smirk tugging at his lips. He led her onto the dance floor. The orchestra began a slow, haunting waltz. Yorick pulled her close, his hand firm on the small of her back. They moved together effortlessly, as if they had rehearsed this moment for a lifetime. "They hate me," Briseis whispered, feeling the glare of the pack. "They are confused," Yorick corrected. "They see a rabbit in the arms of a wolf, and they do not understand why the rabbit is not being eaten." "Why isn't it?" she asked, meeting his gaze. Yorick spun her, the world blurring into a streak of color. "Because this rabbit has claws." For a moment, Briseis forgot the danger. She forgot Alaric. She forgot she was a fugitive. There was only the music, the heat of Yorick's hand, and the strange, electric tether that seemed to bind them together. But the spell was broken by the sound of shattering glass. The heavy double doors of the ballroom blew open with a thunderous crash. The music screeched to a halt. Standing in the doorway was a man. He was impeccably dressed in a white suit that contrasted sharply with the mud and blood on his boots. He had silver hair and a smile that was all teeth. Alaric Stronghaven. Behind him stood 50 of his elite soldiers, crossbows raised and loaded with silver-tipped bolts. Yorick shoved Briseis behind him, a growl ripping from his chest that shook the chandeliers. The entire Ravensfall pack shifted in an instant, gowns and suits tearing as wolves erupted from human skins, a wave of fur and fangs. "Yorick!" Alaric called out, his voice jovial, as if he were greeting an old friend. "Lovely party. Sorry I'm late. Traffic at the border was murder." "You have violated the treaty, Alaric," Yorick roared, his eyes glowing so bright they illuminated the room. "You are dead men walking." "Oh, I don't think so," Alaric drawled. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a remote detonator. "You see, my men didn't just come for the punch. We've planted silver nitrate explosives around the foundation of this tower. One click, and Ravensfall becomes a crater." The room froze. Silver nitrate was poison to shifters. An explosion of that magnitude would wipe out the entire lineage. "What do you want?" Yorick snarled, his body vibrating with the effort to not attack. "Simple." Alaric's eyes locked onto Briseis, who was peering around Yorick's arm. "I want the girl. Over my dead body," Yorick spat. "That can be arranged," Alaric replied coolly. "But think, Yorick. Your pack? Your legacy? Or one human girl?" Yorick hesitated. It was only for a fraction of a second, but Briseis felt it. The weight of the crown. The lives of hundreds of families against hers. She stepped out from behind him. "No," Yorick commanded, grabbing her wrist. "Briseis, stay back. He'll kill them all." "Yorick," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "He'll kill you." "I do not care," Yorick said, his voice raw. "I will not trade you, but I will trade myself." Briseis ripped her wrist free. She walked forward, her red dress flowing around her like blood in the water. She stopped in the center of the empty space between the two armies. "Let them go," Briseis said, her voice shaking but clear. "Leave the pack alone, and I'll come with you." Alaric smiled, a look of pure, predatory triumph. "A wise choice, my dear." "Briseis, don't!" Yorick screamed, lunging forward. Zephyr and 3 other guards tackled their king, holding him back as he thrashed, roaring in agony and rage. "It's okay," Briseis said, looking back at Yorick one last time. "It's the only way." She walked toward Alaric. The white-suited Alpha grabbed her arm roughly, pulling her into his side. "You have no idea what you really are, do you?" Alaric whispered in her ear, loud enough for Yorick to hear across the silent hall. He looked at Yorick, his eyes gleaming with malice. "You thought she was just a witness, Yorick? You fool. Look at her eyes. Alaric pulled a silver dagger and sliced a thin line across Briseis's palm. Blood welled up. But it wasn't red. It was gold. Liquid. Shimmering gold. "She isn't human." Alaric laughed, the sound echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "She is the last daughter of the Sun Clan, the natural predator of the Moon Curse, and I am going to use her blood to become a god." As the realization hit the room like a physical blow, Alaric clicked a button on his watch, not the detonator, but a teleporter. In a flash of blinding light, he and Briseis were gone. Yorick threw the guards off him, his roar of anguish shattering every window in the great hall. The Waitress was gone. The war had begun, and the Alpha King had just lost the only thing that could save or destroy them all. The silence in the great hall of Ravensfall was broken only by the sound of Yorick's breathing, ragged, harsh, and terrified. The teleporter's residue still shimmered in the air, a mockery of the woman who had just vanished. Alaric was gone. Briseis was gone. "Secure the perimeter," Zephyr roared, trying to bring order to the chaos as wolves shifted back into human forms, confused and frightened. "Check for explosives. Move." Yorick didn't move. He stared at the spot where she had stood. He could still smell her scent vanilla, and terror fading into the ozone smell of magic. He looked at his hands. They were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so profound it felt like his marrow was boiling. "Yorick," Zephyr said, approaching cautiously. "We need to evacuate." "The bombs." "There are no bombs," Yorick said, his voice dead. It was a bluff. Alaric is arrogant, but he isn't suicidal. He wouldn't destroy a castle he intends to rule. "He took her," Zephyr said quietly. "He took the human." "She isn't human," Yorick snapped, his eyes flashing violet. "You saw the blood. Gold. Pure, molten gold." He turned to his beta, his face a mask of predatory intent. "She is Sun Clan. The myths. They were real. If she is Sun Clan," Callista said, stepping forward, her green dress torn but her expression serious, "then Alaric doesn't just want a mate. He wants a weapon. The Sun Clan's blood can break the Moon Curse. It can make a shifter immortal." Yorick bared his teeth. "He will not touch her." "He already has," Callista pointed out ruthlessly. "And he took her to the Iron Citadel. We can't breach those walls, Yorick. It's suicide." Yorick walked to the wall where a massive, ancient map of the territories hung. He ripped it down, revealing the stone beneath. He punched the stone, cracking it. "I don't care about walls," Yorick growled. "I don't care about his army. I don't care about immortality." He turned to his pack, his voice rising to a thunderous decree. "Tonight, we do not hunt for territory. We do not hunt for sport. Tonight, we hunt for her." Briseis woke to the smell of sulfur and old blood. She was not in a cell. She was in a cathedral, a twisted, dark inversion of a holy place. The walls were made of black obsidian, and the ceiling was lost in shadows. She was chained to a stone slab in the center of the room, her wrists bound by shackles that hummed with dark magic. "You're awake," a voice echoed. Alaric stepped out of the gloom. He had shed his white suit for a robe of deep crimson. He looked like a priest of a dead god. "Where am I?" Briseis rasped. Her throat felt like it was filled with glass. "The Iron Citadel," Alaric said, walking around the slab, trailing a finger along the stone. "My ancestral home, and the place where you will help me ascend." He stopped beside her, looking down at her bandaged hand. "Gold blood. Do you know how rare you are, Briseis? Your people were hunted to extinction 1,000 years ago. They were too bright, too pure. They burned the eyes of the wolf gods." "I'm just a waitress," Briseis spat, testing the chains. They didn't budge. "You are a battery," Alaric corrected. "A living vessel of solar energy. And when the moon reaches its zenith tonight, I am going to drain you dry. I will drink the sun. And I will become the night itself." He leaned in, his eyes black pools of madness. "Does it hurt? Knowing your alpha isn't coming? Knowing he traded you for his castle?" "He didn't trade me," Briseis said, her voice shaking but defiant. I chose to leave. To save them. And that, Alaric sneered, is why you will die. Heroism is just a pretty word for suicide. He turned and walked away. Rest, little son. You'll need your strength for the screaming. As the heavy doors slammed shut, plunging her into darkness, Briseis didn't cry. She closed her eyes. She thought of Yorick. She thought of the way he looked at her, not like a battery, not like a tool, but like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Wear red, he had said. Let them see you are under my banner. She wasn't wearing red anymore. But deep inside her chest, something sparked. A tiny, golden ember of heat. She focused on it. She fed it with her anger, her fear, and her love. The darkness of the room seemed to recoil. Her skin began to glow. The assault on the Iron Citadel began not with a horn, but with a howl that shook the mountains. Yorick led the charge. He was fully shifted, a massive beast of shadow and violet light, larger than any wolf on the battlefield. Behind him, 300 of Ravensfall's finest warriors surged through the tree line. Alaric's forces were waiting. Archers on the walls rained down silver-tipped arrows. The ground exploded with magical mines, but they hadn't accounted for Yorick's rage. The Alpha King didn't stop. He smashed through the iron gates of the outer wall as if they were made of parchment, the impact sending shrapnel flying. He tore through the enemy lines, a blur of lethal efficiency. He wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to kill. "Left flank!" Zephyr shouted, human form wielding dual swords, cutting down a rogue who tried to flank them. "Protect the king's back!" Callista was a whirlwind of violence, her red hair flying as she decimated a group of Alaric's guards. "Move, you dogs! Push forward!" They breached the courtyard. The citadel loomed ahead, a black spike driving into the sky. "He's in the spire!" Zephyr yelled over the din of battle. "The ritual chamber is at the top!" Yorick shifted back to human form mid-stride, momentum carrying him forward. He grabbed a sword from a fallen enemy and pointed it at the tower. "Hold the courtyard," Yorick commanded. "I go alone." "Yorick, it's a trap," Zephyr warned. "I know," Yorick said, his eyes burning. "But she is waiting." He kicked open the heavy oak doors of the keep and sprinted into the darkness. He fought his way up the winding stairs, leaving a trail of unconscious and broken bodies in his wake. Every step was a battle, every floor was a gauntlet, but he could feel her. It was a strange sensation, a warmth in his chest that grew hotter the higher he climbed. It was like a beacon, calling him home. He reached the top floor. The double doors to the ritual chamber were sealed with magic. Yorick didn't bother with a spell. He channeled all his alpha power into his shoulder and slammed into the wood. The doors shattered. The scene before him froze his blood. Briseis was writhing on the stone slab, screaming. Alaric stood over her, a chalice in one hand, a ceremonial dagger in the other. He had already cut her arm deep. The gold blood was flowing into channels carved into the stone, glowing brighter than fire. Alaric drank from the chalice. His eyes rolled back, and his body began to contort, growing, stretching, shadows erupting from his skin like wings. "Yorick!" Alaric's voice was a distortion, a boom of thunder. "You are too late. The sun is mine." Yorick roared and charged. Alaric simply waved a hand. A wall of solid shadow slammed into Yorick, throwing him backward. He hit the wall with a bone-crunching thud. "I am a god now." Alaric laughed, the sound scraping against the stone. He moved toward Yorick, shadows coalescing into a massive, scythe-like blade in his hand. Yorick struggled to stand, coughing up blood. He looked at Briseis. She was pale, her light fading. "Briseis," he whispered. Briseis turned her head. Her eyes met his. Through the pain, through the haze of blood loss, she saw him. He had come. He had come for the Waitress. "Yorick," she breathed, and in that moment, the ember in her chest became a supernova. "No," Briseis screamed. The sound wasn't just a voice, it was a physical shockwave. The iron shackles binding her wrists to the stone slab didn't just break, they liquefied. Molten iron dripped onto the stone, hissing and popping. But Briseis didn't flinch. She didn't burn. A pillar of pure, blinding golden light erupted from her body, tearing through the obsidian roof of the citadel as if it were paper. The night sky above was suddenly illuminated, the stars drowned out by a brilliance that rivaled the sun. Alaric, who had been towering over Yorick with his shadow scythe raised, shrieked. The shadows clinging to his form hissed and boiled away like water on a hot skillet. He stumbled back, shielding his eyes with a clawed hand. "What is this?" Alaric screeched, his voice warping. "You were drained. You should be empty." Briseis stood up. She wasn't the frightened girl from the diner anymore. She wasn't the waitress who poured coffee and kept her head down. She was radiant, terrifyingly so. Her hair floated around her in a zero-gravity halo, each strand glowing with starlight. Her skin was luminous, veins of liquid gold pulsing beneath the surface. The deep cut on her arm knitted itself together in seconds, leaving not even a scar. "I am not a battery," Briseis said. Her voice echoed, layered with a resonance that vibrated in the marrow of Yorick's bones. "And I am not yours." She raised her hand. The air in the room grew instantly hot, dry, and suffocating. A sphere of concentrated plasma formed in her palm. With a flick of her wrist, she sent it hurtling toward the villain. Alaric roared, summoning a wall of thick, oily darkness to block it. The impact shook the tower to its foundation. Light and shadow collided, creating a shockwave that threw Yorick against the far wall. "You think you can defeat me?" Alaric bellowed, the shadows reforming around him, denser now, like armor. "I have drunk the blood of ancient kings. I have the power of the void." He thrust his hands forward, and shadowy tendrils, tipped with razor-sharp obsidian, shot across the room toward Briseis. "Yorick!" Briseis yelled, her concentration wavering as she held back the darkness with a shield of light. "The shadows! I can't burn them all if he keeps regenerating." Yorick shook the dizziness from his head. He spat blood onto the floor and stood up. He saw the stalemate. Briseis was raw power, unrefined and overwhelming. But Alaric was centuries of practiced malice. He was using the very stones of his citadel to feed his magic. Yorick didn't hesitate. While Alaric was focused on crushing Briseis' shield, Yorick shifted. He didn't just shift. He let the beast take the wheel entirely. He became a monstrosity of fur and violet fury, a creature of nightmare designed to hunt in the dark. He leaped through the air, bypassing the magical duel, and crashed into Alaric from the side. Fangs sank into Alaric's shoulder, tearing through the shadow armor. Alaric howled, his concentration breaking. The shadowy tendrils attacking Briseis dissipated into smoke. "Get off me, cur!" Alaric shouted, driving an elbow into Yorick's ribs with the force of a battering ram. Yorick was thrown back, ribs cracking audibly, but he landed on his feet, snarling. He had drawn blood. Black, tar-like blood oozed from Alaric's shoulder. "You bleed," Yorick growled, his voice guttural. "Gods don't bleed, Alaric." Alaric's eyes narrowed. He pulled a jagged sword of solidified shadow from the air. "Then I will carve the lesson into your corpse." He charged Yorick, the blade humming with necrotic energy. Yorick met him, claws against shadow steel. They moved in a blur, a dance of violence that destroyed the ritual chamber. Pillars collapsed. The stone slab shattered. Briseis watched, her heart hammering against her ribs. She saw Yorick stumble. He was slowing down. The wounds from the siege, the blow to his ribs, he was mortal. Alaric was not tired. Alaric was feeding on the violence. "He's going to die. Yorick is going to die for me." The thought was a cold bucket of water on the fire of her rage. It gave her clarity. She didn't need to throw fireballs. She didn't need to blow up the castle. She needed to be the one thing shadows couldn't survive. She needed to be the dawn. Briseis closed her eyes. She stopped fighting the power and instead pulled it inward. She compressed it, tighter and tighter, until she felt like a star about to collapse. "Yorick, move." Yorick, locked in a blade lock with Alaric, didn't question her. He headbutted Alaric, stunning him for a fraction of a second, and threw himself backward, rolling away. Briseis opened her eyes. They were entirely white. She walked toward Alaric. The villain laughed, raising his sword. A hug? How touch? He never finished the sentence. Briseis placed her hands on his chest. Burn, she whispered. She didn't release a beam. She released everything. She pushed the essence of the sun directly into his core. The light didn't go around him. It went through him. Alaric froze. His sword dropped, clattering on the stones. His mouth opened in a silent scream as beams of light erupted from his eyes. His mouth, the pores of his skin. The shadows inside him didn't just flee. They were incinerated. No, he gasped, his body beginning to flake away like burning paper. I am eternal. You are dust, Briseis said softly. With a final, blinding flash, Alaric disintegrated. There was no body left. No bones. Just a pile of grey ash that swirled in the sudden updraft from the shattered roof. The light faded from the room, leaving only the soft glow of the moon filtering through the broken ceiling. Briseis stood alone in the center of the ruin. The adrenaline crashed. Her knees gave out. She fell, but she never hit the ground. Yorick caught her. He was back in human form, his uniform in tatters, blood streaming from his nose and a nasty gash on his forehead. But his arms were strong. I got you, he rasped, his voice wrecked. I got you, little mouse. Briseis looked up at him. The terrifying goddess was gone. She was just Briseis again, tired, scared, and overwhelmed. She reached up, her hand trembling, and touched the blood on his face. You came, she whispered, tears cutting tracks through the soot on her cheeks. You actually came. I told you, Yorick said, pressing his forehead against hers, closing his eyes as if saying a prayer. I would burn the world. You didn't have to. She smiled weakly, her thumb brushing his lip. I think I did it for you. Yorick laughed, a sound that was half sob, half relief. He pulled her closer, burying his face in her neck, inhaling the scent of ozone and vanilla. You are terrifying. You are the most terrifying thing I have ever seen. Is that a compliment? It is the highest praise I can give. He pulled back, cupping her face with hands that were surprisingly gentle given the violence they had just wrought. He looked at her not as a king looking at a subject, but as a man looking at his salvation. He kissed her then. It wasn't a tentative first kiss. It was fierce, desperate, a reclaiming of life in the face of death. It tasted of ash, blood, and victory. Briseis wound her arms around his neck, pulling him down, anchoring herself to him. In the ruin of the enemy's tower, surrounded by destruction, they finally found the safety they had both been hunting for. Below them, in the courtyard, the sounds of battle had ceased. The remaining soldiers of Stronghaven dropped their weapons as the golden light from the tower washed over them, signaling the end of their tyrant. The war was over. The king had his queen, and the sun had finally risen in the land of the night. 3 months later, the Rusty Spoon Diner had a new owner, but its former best waitress was nowhere to be found. High in the mountains, the Ravensfall Keep was no longer a place of gloom. The windows were open. The gardens were blooming with impossible colors, sunflowers growing in the snow, nurtured by the touch of the woman who walked among them. Briseis stood on the balcony, looking out over the territory. She wore a dress of white and gold, the heavy collar of the Alpha Queen resting comfortably on her collarbones. Strong arms wrapped around her waist from behind. Yorick rested his chin on her shoulder. He was healed, his scars faded, his violet eyes at peace. Regretting the promotion? He murmured into her ear. The hours are long, Briseis teased, leaning back into him. And the boss is demanding. The boss is hopeless without you, he corrected softly. He turned her around, his hand cupping her cheek. You didn't just hide here, Briseis. You brought the light. You saved us from the dark. I just wanted to survive, she whispered. And now? Briseis looked at the horizon, where the sun was setting, painting the sky in colors that matched her soul. She looked at the man who had been her monster, her savior, and now her mate. "Now," she said, pulling him down for a kiss, "I want to live." If you enjoyed this story of forbidden love, magic, and destiny, please like and share. Don't forget to subscribe for more romance that bites back. What would you do if the Alpha King offered you protection? Let us know in the comments below.